Thank you. Thank you. The reason that I created this podcast is because I want to feel better. So many of the right-wing talk show hosts that I've listened to over the years make me feel worse, more anxious, more fearful, angrier. And I want to feel better, and I want the people who listen to my podcast to feel better after having listened to it than they did at the beginning.
William Shatner at 93 remains sarcastic and entertaining.
When men landed on the moon, which is July 20th, 1969.
Oh, look at you.
Well, what's amazing to me is that you said you were so down on your luck at the time because Star Trek had been canceled that you watched it from your truck.
In a pasture on Long Island, through a window in my little truck, where I was sleeping with my dog, okay?
Star Trek only was canceled like 6 months before. How did you fall so fast from TV star to living in your
great precision and intent? How did I know that I was going to get divorced? And how did I know that all that would, just circumstances of life?
But that's quick.
That was, yeah.
Because
Good morning. It's Friday, Policecraft Friday, April the 26th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and policecraft. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now to Stuart Varney and Company and the news headlines.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I'm David Asman, in for Stuart Varney. Well, Stuart said this earning period would be a reckoning for AI, and it sure is. Look no further than Microsoft and Google. Their bets on AI are paying off and boosting their bottom lines. We're all over that. We got some key data on inflation this morning. CPE, or the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index. It's a long phrase. It's a jargon. It just means inflation without food and energy. It's coming in hotter than expected year over year. Futures initially adding to the gains, but now leveling out. The Dow and S&P 500 and NASDAQ, we're taking a look at them. They were much higher. They've come down, but they're still in the green. Let's check interest rates. The 10-year just above 4.66 is right now. It's down a tick as we speak. The 2-year yield, which yesterday went over 5%, is now just below it at 4.98. Bitcoin is trading around 64,000, about flat there. Gold is moving higher. Not a huge move, up $15.60 for an ounce. Oil also on the rise, trading around 84 $4 a barrel. To politics now, and quote, do not step on our red lines. Remember that? That's a warning from China officials while meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken. But where are our red lines? That's what I want to know. President Biden is in New York, meanwhile, but will he take time to address any of the crises, the migrant crisis, the crime crisis that are facing the city? Will he deal with the college protests? Safe to say, probably not. And bad news for Biden, the liberal New York Times is not happy with him. Apparently, they are now blasting him for his lack of media access. And that's not all. Axios is reporting that Biden has changed his walking routine to Marine One. Now, instead of walking alone, he's surrounded by aides. This way, his stiff gait and shuffling is a little less noticeable. We got a very big show for you, folks. Happy Friday to everybody. Congressman Mike Waltz, Congressman Byron Donalds, Morgan Ortegas, and Byron York, all here. It is Friday, April 26, 2024. Barney and Company is about to begin.
And that was the news headlines from Barney and Company. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Cowboys.
In the annals of the Old West, where stories of heroic lawmen and notorious outlaws intertwine, few characters embody the paradoxical nature of this era like Burton Alvord. Alvord will become a respected lawman, wearing a badge and defending justice on the uncompromising border. However, fate took out another path for him, as he finally succumbed to the lure of an outlaw lifestyle, giving up his prestigious profession and the plunge into a life of crime. In this video, we dive into the compelling story of Burton Alvord, tracing his transformation from respected lawman to notorious outlaw, whose exploits captivated the imaginations of many in the tumultuous days of the Old West. Albert Burt Alvord was born on September 11, 1867, in Plumas County, California. His father, Charles E. Alvord, a native of New Zealand, worked as a miner and machinist for several mining companies. However, Charles eventually turned to community service, taking on roles such as police officer and justice of the peace in the various towns the family lived in. Due to the ever-changing needs of the mining industry, the Alvord family moved frequently from boomtown to boomtown during Burt's early years. By 1879, the family had settled in Pima County, Arizona Territory. However, their stay there was short-lived, as they soon moved to Tombstone in Cochise County. Alvord's education was informal, but he may have learned a lot from his father's cases of local disputes. In addition, Alvord spent considerable time working at the famous OK Corral, where he absorbed a wealth of knowledge about the area and its inhabitants. Contrary to popular belief, there is no credible evidence to support the claim that Alvord witnessed the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral in 1881. However, the chaotic and lawless atmosphere for which Tombstone was famous left a lasting impression on a certainly young Alvord. Despite Alvord's reputation for frequenting pubs and engaging in bar brawls, Cochise County Sheriff John Horton Slaughter saw potential in him and named him deputy in 1886. That same year, Alvord faced the tragedy of losing his mother. Initially, Alvord served as Slaughter's subordinate, performing a variety of tasks that showed his lack of experience and ingenuity in law enforcement. He is often described as not noble, temperate, far-seeing, or unselfish. However, he assisted Slaughter in capturing or eliminating many attackers, thieves, and outlaws from 1886 to 1889. Unfortunately, over time, Alvord's reputation suffered due to his obvious signs of alcoholism. Frequenting the pubs, Alvord eventually began to associate with gamblers and suspected outlaws, prompting Slaughter to reprimand him. Faced with this advice, Alvord relinquished his position. Alvord then began his legal career in the 1890s, practicing law in as many towns as Fairbank and Pierce, both located in Arizona. In 1896, Alvord settled in Cochise County, where he married Lola Ochoa, bought a farm, and adopted a more settled life. Once again, he found himself serving as deputy sheriff. However, just 2 years later, Alvord had to go through the pain of losing his father. Then, suddenly and without explanation, in late December 1899, Alvord resigned as deputy sheriff, leaving the community confused. Almost immediately after submitting his badge, Alvord made the fateful decision to abandon his wife and indulge in a life of crime. Teaming up with notorious outlaws Billy Stiles, Bill Downing, and three-toed Jack Dunlop, individuals he had previously pursued as a lawman, Alvord has formed a formidable gang. Operating in Cochise County, Alvord and Stiles committed a series of daring armed robberies. However, their criminal assault ended when law enforcement arrested them. Somehow, they managed to escape. On February 15, 1900, Dunlop was killed by attorney Jeff Milton in a negligent train robbery in Fairbank, Arizona, and Bravo gang rookie Juan Yoas was wounded. Later that year, Alvord was arrested again and taken to Tombstone. In a bold act of loyalty, Billy Stiles rode into Tombstone and staged a blatant attack, wounding the deputy responsible for protecting Alvord. This bold act helped Alvord and 24 other prisoners escape from captivity. In 1902, Alvord assisted Arizona Ranger Captain Burton C. Mossman in capturing notorious Mexican gangster Agustin Chacon. This partnership was motivated by Alvord's desire to share prize money and reduce sentences. After Chacon was arrested and later convicted of murder, which eventually led him to being hanged in Solomonville, Alvord thought a lot and made an important decision. He chose not to surrender. Instead, Alvord, along with Stiles, returned to their criminal path, now pursued relentlessly by the Arizona Rangers. In December 1903, the law enforcement team almost rounded them up, but Alvord and Stiles managed to escape. Alvord even tried to fake their deaths using the bodies of 2 unidentified Mexicans. Alvord secretly sent these bodies to Tombstone, claiming they were his and Stiles. However, a quick check revealed that the dead were not 2 wanted outlaws. Relentless in pursuit of the outlaws, the determined Arizona Rangers eventually cornered them near the international border, precisely in the vicinity of Mexico near Naco, on February 1904. Despite their initial resistance, both Alvord and his accomplices were wounded and eventually forced to surrender. After their arrest, Alvord was held within the walls of the Yuma Territory Prison for a period of 2 years. After his release, he announced his intention to embark on a fresh start. Boarding a train, he began his journey to Central America. He was last seen in 1910, during this time, as a worker on the ambitious Panama Canal project. After this point, the details of Alvord's next fate remain a mystery, leaving his final fate unknown to this day. While Alvord's fate may still be shrouded in uncertainty, his story continues to capture the imagination, prompting us to ponder his underlying motives and underlying factors.
And that was Cowboys. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the patriotic shorts.
When there were wounded Japanese soldiers, their commanders ordered their fellow soldiers to execute them because they didn't want cripples going home. They couldn't deal with them there. And so rather than have the Allies pick them up, they executed them in place. Can you imagine how Japanese soldiers felt about this?
How do we explain the high morale, the famously high morale of the Japanese military, where they would refuse to surrender even after given orders by their superior?
It's because it's a different culture. If you come home back as a failed soldier, you bring dishonor to yourself, your family. So that's why it is so difficult for them to surrender. However, by the time you get to the end of the war, they are so exhausted. Think about it. Their economy is, I don't know, I can't remember the statistics exactly. It's something like a 10th of our economy. They have something like a 13th of our, I can't remember, it was coal or steel production. And they don't have any local oil production. They're importers of food, and they're not getting that food. So by the time you get to 45, they're exhausted. And it's a shattering that occurs.
I say, follow me. And I lead the assault. I'm the first guy out of the trench. There were 5 of us. A machine gun opens up. My forward observer. I'm talking to him. He has a strap across his chest with an M2 compass on there. When I see the thing explode, boom. He dies. This guy dies next to him. Jack Gell, my good friend's commissar sergeant, he dies. John Clark, my other radio operator, and I survive unscathed. Now, I can't explain it. I think about this daily, Dear Lord, why me? I would almost say I'd rather it have been me.
Why the A-10 Warthog's wheels don't fully retract after takeoff is not what you think. The A-10 operates close to the front lines and therefore was built to be able to take a punch, which is why it can fly with one engine, half the tail, one elevator, and half a wing missing. Plus, it had self-sealing fuel tanks, so it wouldn't leak fuel if it got hit. Now, once the mission was over, in case the landing gear couldn't be deployed due to damage or hydraulics failure, the A-10 would have been forced to do a belly landing, also known as a gear-up landing. And having parts of the wheels out meant that the aircraft could roll on its belly rather than skid, which would minimize the damage.
The U.S. Air Force in 2003 proposed a tungsten rod weapon that could go Mach 10, hitting the planet with kinetic energy equivalent to 11.5 tons of TNT. Such a weapon would be extremely difficult to defend against and would not require explosive warheads. Colloquially termed rods from God, this type of kinetic energy penetrator, KEP, would theoretically consist of a pair of satellites. One serves as a targeting hub, and the other is equipped with 6-meter-long, 20 feet, tungsten rods that would be dropped on a target from orbit. Capable of penetrating hundreds of feet into the Earth's crust, these thunderbolts from Thor would produce damage equivalent to a nuclear blast. Although the cost of getting such rods into orbit is considered prohibitive, orbital bombardment systems with conventional warheads are permitted under SALT II, and some have proposed using large tungsten carbide or uranium ceramide rods rather than explosive.
It's guaranteed that if they go into Taiwan, it is a high consequence event, without a doubt. And what the odds are, I don't know. However, if you listen to their speeches, they tell you they're going to do it, right? They're consistent. And the West learned that you read improbable speeches, right? People read Mein Kampf and said, oh, this is a nutcase, no one would ever do that. Well, it quite accurately represented. People, even in dictatorships, they have to transmit message to population, and they quite often very accurately tell you what they're going to do. Putin has been quite clear what he's been up to. Stalin was very clear what he was up to. So let's judge Xi Jinping at his word, and he says he's going to go for it. But here's a problem for which we don't have a solution. The Chinese Communist Party, to me, has clearly made the decision that it wants to maintain a monopoly of political power. And for a while there under Deng Xiaoping, that worked because the reforms that they wanted to make for agriculture and things, they can maintain their monopoly of power, but do things that allow people to get much wealthier, right? And so that went in tandem for a number of years. Now we're at the inflection point where you have a lot of educated people and businesses who are really integrated into the world, and they want to make autonomous decisions. And the Communist Party worries about this because what do people want at that point is probably some influence over political decisions. And the Communist Party said that's off the table.
When I showed up to the Ranger Regiment, there were really 2 types of guys in the Ranger Regiment. There were folks that had been around either since Vietnam or just a handful of guys that took part in the invasion of Grenada in 1983, Operation Urgent Fury. For 95% of us, though, no one had any real military experience. And some of them have been in the Army for 15 years with no real military experience at this point. My platoon sergeant who went to Panama with me, he had been involved in the invasion of Grenada, and he was able to basically tell me, this is what it's going to be like, this is how you should react. And really, his combat experience helped get me ready for what we were going to experience in Panama. It was basically exactly what he said it was going to be.
How these large and ugly airplanes are almost impossible to shoot down is not what you think. AWACS airplanes like the E-3 Sentry, E-7 Wedgetail, and the Boeing Falcon are considered high-value heavy airborne assets, or in layman terms, they need to be protected at all costs. So when flying close to enemy territory, AWACS planes will always be escorted by friendly jets to deter enemy fighters. And when it comes to surface-to-air missile threats, AWACS airplanes have electronic countermeasure systems that are over 5 times more powerful than that of airplanes like the EA-18 Growler. And even if a long-range missile manages to get past all these defense layers, AWACS platforms are equipped with several pounds of chaff and flares to throw off the missiles.
One of the things that happened, and this is where it becomes very emotional for me, I reached a point where I could see that I had to talk to God in a real hurry. I remember looking up to God, and I yelled, God, no matter what it is you want me to do, I'll do it forever or the rest of my life. And almost instantly, the Navy had shot down smoke flares way down below the beach near Vierville. And the smoke had drifted up by us. At that point, Colonel Cannon, who was my regimental commander, had come along in the smoke and said, okay, guys, get off the beach, get your ass up here, get up to the beach and run. And it was almost simultaneously. He yelled, 29, let's go. And we did.
The Dassault Rafale, a French fighter platform that first flew in the mid-1980s, has recently seen a surge in popularity, becoming the second most purchased Western fighter since 2022, trailing only the F-35. This versatile aircraft, capable of conducting air supremacy, reconnaissance, and ground support missions, has been ordered by multiple countries, with over 495 orders since the start of 2024. Questions arise about Dassault's capacity to meet this demand. The Rafale's appeal lies in its robust performance, significant payload capacity, and advanced electronic systems, offering a strong alternative to American and Russian jets. The Rafale remains a favorite in the Middle East, India, and Eastern Europe, largely due to geopolitical tensions. While this 4.5 generation fighter does not benefit from the stealth and advanced sensor technology of the newer F-35s, it has proven to be a competent platform.
Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931. Hitler invades Poland in 1939. And in retrospect, we think of them as part of the same great global conflict, whereas they were separated by 8 years. I wonder if you think of Ukraine, do you think that it could cascade into something like that?
Yeah, this is the problem with all of this. Of course, it could. And there are many people working to prevent this from happening. You see all of these meetings where our leaders are meeting with each other. If you get into some global war with people with nuclear weapons, when the losers decide that rather than losing, they're going to go for one more roll of the die, which is a nuclear weapon, then the question is whether the people below them will actually implement the order. Think about low probability but high consequence events. I don't know what the probability is, but I know the consequences are huge.
And the probability is iterated over many years and decades.
Right, yeah. You've got to always not use nuclear weapons, right? Pandora's already, the box has been opened, the nukes are there.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, motivation.
The power of a vision-driven life, that without a vision, one scripture says, people perish. Without a vision, another translation said they go unrestrained. They get unfocused with their life, and it goes off because they're not focused on where they're supposed to be focused.
Everything that you do is supposed to be motivated by your vision. Everything. Vision is supposed to be the source of your human motivation. It simplifies your life. Vision imprisons you so you can fulfill it. It's dangerous to find a vision, because if you ever find a vision for your life, you might lose some friends. People with a vision are very narrow. Vision is the source of self-discipline. That's why when a person discovers their vision, they become a leader. When a person discovers vision for their lives, it automatically takes them into leadership development. And because leadership is discovering something that's worth dying for. That's when you become a leader. You pursue something that makes you self-controlled. Therefore, the man or the woman or the people with a clear vision for their lives live a very narrow life.
As you go through the challenges of life and you look at it and embrace whatever comes to you, don't run from it. Step toward it. Don't try and duck it like most people do. See, most people want it easy. See, easy come, easy what? easy go. See, but when you go at what you're going to deal with and you deal with the difficulties of it, when you handle those hard things close at hand, making those hard decisions right now that you don't want to make, learning those things that you don't like to do, but you know that in order for you to get where you want to go, this is one of the hoops that you have to flip through.
The greatest weapon of the adversary against your life is to get you involved in good things that are not the right things for you to do. Vision tells you what's right. Life gives you what's good. And until you find vision, you'll be doing a lot of good things that are not right for you. And therefore you end up being busy but not effective. Whatever we do here must be guided by the action motivated by that vision. And that is why vision does not compete. When you have a vision, there's no competition with you. No one can compete with a vision because visions are unique assignments.
If you advance confidently in the direction of your own dreams and endeavor to live the life which you have imagined, you will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. It will chase after you if you can place into your imagination what it is that you would like to attract and begin to feel it.
Life of vision inspires action. Life of vision becomes a practical guide for creating plans, setting goals and objectives. Life of vision helps to evaluate our life. It provides focus. It gives us faith. It gives us motivation. It produces discipline. It opens doors for miracles, and it gives life a purpose. One of the greatest things you can get from God after you received salvation and the gift of the Holy Spirit is a personal vision for your life.
When you capture a vision, it simplifies everything because vision controls all of your choices after that. Once you know where you're going, you also automatically know what roads won't take you there. So if you know what to do, you automatically know what you shouldn't do. Vision defines your what to do in life because vision gives you your address, your permanent address. It shows you your destination.
Ideas that become so powerful in your mind and your consciousness, they seem real to you even before they become tangible. Imagination that is so strong that you can actually see it. Once I understood that, I knew then it was possible to build a career. I knew it was possible to build good health. I knew it was possible to build a relationship. I knew I could participate in the constructing of valuable things, valuable enterprises, valuable things that would help and benefit other people. I knew I could be part of it, and I knew I could do it once I understood this formula.
It's a manifestation of what we believe, what's possible for us. Whatever you've done up to this point, all that it really is a duplication, it's a reproduction of what you believe subconsciously that you deserve and what's possible for your life. Most people operate out of their personal history, out of their memory, things they've done, things they've experienced, things they've seen, things that they have observed. What I'm suggesting that you operate out of a larger vision of yourself. I want you to see yourself doing what you want to do, experiencing what you want to experience, having what you want to have, doing what it is that gives your life some meaning and value. Operate out of your imagination, not your memory. Because whenever you look at where you want to go, I'm wanting to warn you, you will have some conversation back here after you go through the data that you've experienced in life saying you can't do it. The kind of person you become, the character that you build, the courage that you develop, the faith that you're manifesting. Oh, it's something that you get up in the morning, you look yourself in the mirror, you're a different kind of person. You walk with a different kind of spirit. And people know that you know what life is, that you have embraced life. You knew it was hard, but you did it hard.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Law for April the 26th.
April 26th. Make your accomplishments seem effortless. A line of poetry will take us hours, maybe. Yet if it does not seem a moment's thought, our stitching and unstitching has been naught. Adam's Curse, William Butler Yeats. In the Book of the Courtier, published in 1528, Baldassare Castiglione describes the highly elaborate and codified manners of the perfect court citizen. And yet, Castiglione explains, the courtier must execute these gestures with what he calls sprezzatura, the capacity to make the difficult seem easy. He urges the courtier to practice in all things a certain nonchalance, which conceals all artistry, and makes whatever one says or does seem uncontrived and effortless. We all admire the achievement of some unusual feat, but if it is accomplished naturally and gracefully, our admiration increases tenfold. Whereas, to labor at what one is doing, and to make bones over it, shows an extreme lack of grace and causes everything, whatever it's worth, to be discounted. Much of the idea of sprezzatura came from the world of art. All the great Renaissance artists carefully kept their works under wraps. Only the finished masterpiece could be shown to the public. Michelangelo forbade even popes to view his work in process. A Renaissance artist was always careful to keep his studios shut to patrons and public alike, not out of fear of imitation, but because to see the making of the works would mar the magic of their effect, and their studied atmosphere of ease and natural beauty. Daily Law. Your actions must seem natural and executed with ease. When you act as if you could do much more. Avoid the temptation of revealing how hard you work. It only raises questions. The 48 Laws of Power, Law 30. Make your accomplishments seem effortless.
And that was the Daily Law for April the 26th from the Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Barron.
40% of the population of adults either believe that Jesus is a mythical character or they're uncertain whether he was a real person. So in other words, nearly half of adults in the UK think that Jesus was either a myth or a legend. What would you say to people who find the Bible interesting, maybe helpful from a psychological perspective, but doubt its historical reliability?
Read the scholars. There's an absolute consensus. Scholars left to right, skeptical to devout, affirming the real historical existence of Jesus. We have some of the best evidence for Jesus of anyone from the ancient world. Do you believe Alexander the Great was a real historical figure? Well, who doubts it? Do you believe Julius Caesar was a real historical figure? Who would doubt it? We have far more historically reliable information about Jesus than either of those two figures. But it's born, Brandon, of a deep prejudice, against religion. So we want to debunk and kind of re-mythologize Jesus. But it's just not faithful at all to the serious scholarship.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, is man free? In mankind's history, capitalism is the only system that answers yes. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
4. The Ojibwe tribe of the North American plains contained a warrior society known as the Windigokan, no-flight contraries. Only the bravest men who had demonstrated bravery by their utter disregard for danger on the battlefield were admitted to the Windigokan. In fact, because they had no fear of death, they were considered no longer among the living. They slept and ate separately and were not held to the usual codes of behavior. As creatures who were alive, but among the dead, They spoke and acted contrarily. They called a young person an old man, and when one of them told the others to stand still, he meant charge forward. They were glum in times of prosperity, happy in the depths of winter. Although there was a clownish side to their behavior, the Wendigoken could inspire great fear. No one ever knew what they would do next. The Wendigoken were believed to be inhabited by terrifying spirits called thunderers, which appeared in the form of giant birds. That made them somehow inhuman. On the battlefield, they were disruptive and unpredictable, and in raiding parties, downright terrifying. In one such raid, witnessed by an outsider, they gathered first in front of the Ojibwe chief's lodge and yelled, "We are not going to war. We shall not kill the Sioux. We shall not scalp 4 of them and let the rest escape. We shall go in daytime." They left camp that night, wearing costumes of rags and scraps, their bodies plastered with mud and painted with splotches of weird color, their faces covered by frightening masks with giant beak-like noses. They made their way through the darkness, stumbling over themselves. It was hard to see through the masks, until they came upon a large Sioux war party. Although outnumbered, they did not flee, but danced into the enemy's center. The grotesqueness of their dance made them seem to be possessed by demons. Some of the Sioux backed away. Others drew close, curious and confused. The leader of the Wendigoken shouted, "Don't shoot!" The Ojibwe warriors then pulled out guns hidden under their rags, killed 4 Sioux, and scalped them. Then they danced away, the enemy too terrified by this apparition to pursue them. After such an action, the mere appearance of the Wendigoken was enough for the enemy to give them a wide berth and not risk any kind of encounter. Interpretation. What made the Wendigoken so frightening was the fact that, like the forces of nature from which they claimed to derive their powers, they could be destructive for no apparent reason. Their mounting of a raid was not governed by need or ordered by the chief. Their appearance bore no relation to anything known, as if they had rolled on the ground or in trays of paint. They might wander in the dark until they chanced on an enemy. Their dancing was like nothing anyone had seen or imagined. They might suddenly start to kill and scalp, then stop at an arbitrary number. In a tribal society governed by the strictest of codes, these were spirits of random destruction and irrationality. The use of the unconventional can startle and give you an advantage, but it does not often create a sense of terror. What will bring you ultimate power in this strategy is to follow the Wendigoken and adapt a kind of randomness that goes beyond rational processes, as if you were possessed by a spirit of nature. Do this all the time and you'll be locked up, but do it right, dropping hints of the irrational and random at the opportune moment, and those around you will always have to wonder what you'll do next. You will inspire a respect and fear that will give you great power. An ordinary appearance spiced by a touch of divine madness is more shocking and alarming than an out-and-out crazy person. Remember, your madness, like Hamlet's, must be strategic. Real madness is all too predictable.
And that was the chapter 24 from the 33 Strategies of War from Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you need to vote Republican and become a Republican because President Biden is not only the face of the country, the leader of the country, but he is the titular head of the Democrat Party. And what he does reflects on the Democrat Party and everybody in it. So right now, the Democrat Party is a party that wanders around not knowing where it's going, what it's doing, or what it's saying. It is brain-addled. And you, as a voter, deserve better. That's why you need to vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. There's been a change in our culture that I just figured out how to articulate, and that is that we've become a whiny, complaining society, and whining and complaining because the issue now, or the desire now, is to become the most pitiable person. It used to be, when I was growing up, that people wanted to be respectable and admired. That was the goals. No matter what it is that you were doing, you wanted to be respected and you wanted to be admired. Those were the goals. So if you found yourself in a difficult situation, you would tell people how you handled it. Well, I did this, I did that, I said this, I said that, and show them how it is that you triumphed over that problem, that issue. And now, today, it is whining and complaining that the issue has defeated you. I hear it every day on talk radio. People call up about the homeless and say, woe is me, Sean Hannity, because I have these bums that are sleeping on my doorstep, and things of that nature. They want to be pitied. What it is, it's a race to the bottom, that they want to be pitied more than the homeless guy. It's not showing up and saying, there's a homeless guy on my doorstep, and this is what I did about it. I got rid of him, and I did it this way, that way, and the other way. This is the first action I took. This is the second action I took. I remember a woman that called a radio station, and she says she complained that there was a woman that would jog by her house, and then one day she stopped, got onto her lawn, and took a dump on her lawn, and then went merrily about her way, and then came back, I think, the next day and did it again. And the woman was basically complaining about it. Woe is me, feel sorry for me because I've got some jogger pooping on my lawn. Well, my first thought was, where's your garden hose? Okay, that would be the first thing I would think of, is it's time to hose this woman down. She comes down and starts dropping her pants. She's going to do it soaking wet. And maybe worse. And maybe a little bit of a shovel. She produces anything on my lawn, I'm going to pick it up and fling it on her. And she can wear it home. And she can think twice, 3 times, 10 times before she comes back to do it again. Okay? Overcome. But and part of it is that sum it up is that these people are cowards and that we glorify cowardice. I thought about that the other day when somebody was talking about how Joe Biden didn't do this or didn't do that in terms of foreign policy. And he's, the best way to sum it up is he's a coward. He's just an absolute coward. He won't take a stand, for instance, on Israel versus Hamas. Israel is the way to go. Israel is the aggrieved party. They're doing what they should do. They're showing some guts by going into Gaza and destroying Hamas. That's an assertive, aggressive thing to do. It is the right thing to do. It is the just thing to do. And he should be standing up for Israel for that reason. But he's a coward. He's afraid of college students at Columbia University and a few handfuls of college students around the country that are doing sit-ins and whatnot. He's afraid that he's not going to get their vote. He's scared of these people. He is a coward. And the Democrat Party itself is famous for being cowards when it comes to foreign policy. This is why historically Republicans have been elected president. Democrats have usually owned the Congress because of this, quote, compassion. We got to be compassionate. Fine, that might work for domestic policy, for having various types of welfare programs and whatnot. But when it comes to foreign policy, that's not going to cut it. You got to have some courage. And the Democrats have always lacked courage. They've always been the ones that want to lead by running away. And that's exactly what Biden's doing. And it's like an infection. The whole country is now showing off their cowardice. They're not out looking to be admired and respected, but pitied. They want to be pitied. No, thank you. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the next chapter in Policecraft.
18. Interrogation. You have the right to remain silent, although personally, I don't feel remaining silent is all it's cracked up to be. Smoke? Daniel Baldwin as Detective Bo Felton. Homicide. Life on the street. If you want to become adept at interrogation, you have to understand theory, be mindful of case law, and follow people who excel. I've studied approaches like the Reed method and watched seminars from experts like former FBI agent Dan Kraft. I've picked my coworkers' brains about what works and what doesn't. But there's no substitute for putting the miles in yourself. I have sat across the table from many a suspect trying to get them, in some cases, to tell me the worst thing they've ever done. The prize for their candor? Probably state prison, where the food is questionable and the view isn't great. It isn't always an easy sell, but it's far from impossible. We'll get to that in a minute. The point of an interrogation isn't to get a confession. The point of an interrogation is to get both sides of the story, to work toward the truth of the matter. Sometimes the suspect didn't do it. See Duke Lacrosse or www.innocenceproject.org, or didn't do it in the way the victim claims he did. Maybe this suspect is an awful person who has routinely done awful things, but just didn't do this particular awful thing he's currently being accused of. And if he didn't do it, the last thing you want is for him to say that he did, because then not only do you have the wrong man, but the right one is still out there, and the clock is ticking. But you don't see a lot of false confessions. Safeguards are in place, like the Miranda warnings, as well as the powerful human inclination not to admit to crimes you didn't do. If a false confession comes into play at all, it's typically with juveniles, a few of whom only wish to please you or will say just about anything if they think it will help them go home. You sometimes see it with the developmentally disabled and or mentally ill. Or one suspect takes the fall for someone else, like when you have 3 felons in a car, plus a loyal fellow from the neighborhood, and the cops find a gun in the car. Loyal guy will claim the gun is his, because he knows all he'll get is a misdemeanor summons to appear, whereas the felons are looking at serious time. Before you even step into a room with a suspect you intend to question, you have to do some homework. Is the guy an addict? Homeless? Is this his first arrest? Or is he a hardened con? Any gang ties? What neighborhood does he frequent, and who are his running buddies? Is he on social media, flashing a gun and a stack of cash? A brief background check will give you some grist to work with, and a general idea as to which approach to use. Facts work better with felons, and emotional appeals work better with folks who haven't been in the system much. The less serious the offense, the less you research, because they aren't all the Black Dahlia. Like the guy who sneaks into a house through an open window and steals 2 yogurts. It's still a felony, but maybe you don't have to peer quite so hard into this man's soul. The experts, whoever they are, say interrogation should take place in a windowless room around 10 by 10 with a table and 2 chairs about 4 feet apart. That's it. You want enough space so no one is cramped, but not so much that you can't get close to your interviewee. The lack of any other furnishings is to minimize distractions. You position yourself between the suspect and the exit door as if to indicate to the suspect that he has to appease you in order to leave the room. It's a non-supportive environment used by the investigator to create a certain mood, which ranges from understanding to isolation and despair. But isn't this whole business with the Spartan decor and the chair and table positioning a bit overwrought? Maybe. But people talk in such rooms, and as long as it gets results, you'll keep doing it. When you first enter, some suspects give you the hard slouch with the crossed arms. You try to loosen them up by telling them they can relax because you don't bite. Other suspects receive you with visible relief or even enthusiasm. Finally, the detective is here to listen to me. Together, perhaps we can make some sense of these trumped-up allegations. One female auto thief actually told me, "Thank you for coming." "You're quite welcome," I replied cheerfully, like we were old pals, all the while thinking, unless you're one of the 3% who didn't do it, I ain't exactly here to help you, lady. As it turned out, she was not one of those 3%, and in fact admitted she stole the shit out of the car in question. When you sit down to interrogate suspects, you extend your hand. It is rare that they don't shake it, although some do so grudgingly. You shake because you're trying to set the tone early that you're open, understanding, even avuncular. You take the handcuffs off all but the most violent. You often bring them a soft drink and a candy bar, and it tells you something when the suspect tears into it like he hasn't eaten all day. I once gave a guy a strawberry scone I was saving for a mid-afternoon snack. He gobbled it up and then confessed to swinging a metal pipe at a guy's head. I figure the $2.75 I was out was worth it. Hamburgers have helped solve many a violent felony because they make an instant connection between you and the suspect, and because they taste good. Some investigators prefer to read the suspect the Miranda rights right from the jump and then start in with some rapport building. Others ask background questions first, so the suspect becomes comfortable talking and then hit the suspect with Miranda. But regardless, you have to advise the suspect of his rights before you start asking questions about the crime at hand. I like to tell the suspect, "I gotta read you your rights," as if this represents a mildly irritating obstacle we both have to overcome before we can reach an understanding. Then I'll tell them, and then we'll find a way forward. After all, who doesn't want that? Or I'll say, we'll figure this thing out together, like it's a moderately hard science project we've both been assigned. Investigators will read the Miranda rights directly off a pre-printed card, even if they've read those same words 1,000 times before. It's just one less thing you have to worry about in court, where a defense attorney will pounce on any deviation from the Miranda script, however slight. You want to avoid Channing Tatum's Miranda oversight in 21 Jump Street, when he claims one of them is the right to be a lawyer. You can do all the research in the world and come up with a master game plan for your interrogation, full of challenges, feints, and doublebacks, but some guys just ain't having it. Like the drowsy junkie who falls asleep on the bench and whose most comprehensive statement to you, when roused, is something like, or the experienced parolee who is utterly resistant to your wiles and charms. "Man, I've been in the system," one con announced in disbelief when I tried to get him talking about one of the many felonies he'd committed that morning. "Just tell me what I'm being charged with." A serial burglar who had already been interrogated the previous night on a different B&E wouldn't even sit down when I walked in the room to interview him about my case. "Look," he said, and then paused with a furrowed brow and an expression of intense concentration such that I could almost see the gears working in his brain. "Is there any way that talking to you is going to help me?" If I had been more on my game, I would have sold him on the concept of talking to me. I would have told him that maybe he had a good reason to do what he did, or that it was important for a man to give an accounting of himself, or that judges look favorably on truth-tellers, because if you were a judge, who would you be lenient on? The guy who asks you to prove it, or the guy who steps forward and says, "I made a mistake, and I'm sorry"? But I wasn't a good salesman that day, because after he asked his question, I paused. And the pause was, I think, just long enough for him to sense that whatever I was about to peddle him was going to be a whole lot of bullshit. He asked to be taken back to his cell. No sale. And finally, there was the armed robber who reportedly hit his victim in the face with a gun the previous night. He proved immune to my tactics. "I really want to punch your bitch ass in the mouth because you don't believe me," he shouted about 10 minutes into the interview. Then he kicked the table over and it smacked me in the leg. So I arrested him for battery to a law enforcement officer. I told him all he'd done was catch another case. "Well, that's a case I did, so I don't give a fuck," he proclaimed. At least there's a statement I can use. But a suspect getting physical in an interrogation room is rare, and a suspect invoking his right to remain silent or his right to an attorney, while more common, still doesn't happen nearly as often as one might think. I have conducted hundreds of interrogations. I can count on one hand the number of times a suspect has asked for a lawyer at the start of an interview. More often than not, people talk. So what's going on here? Wouldn't they be better off keeping their big trap shut? Do defense attorneys instruct their clients? "Go ahead and answer the seasoned detective's many pointed questions about your criminal culpability, Marvin, and when it's all over, we'll see where it leaves us"? Is it ever a good idea to talk to the police after being Mirandized? The answer is a resounding, almost certainly not. Only if you're wholly innocent, for instance. Or if you did it, but you're a wordsmith who not only can articulate plausible deniability, but are a lot smarter than the detective questioning you. A lot of cons are convinced of the latter. Quite a few of them are in state prison right now. Why do they talk? You just told them they don't have to. You just advised them that everything they say could hurt them in court. But as I just stated, some crooks think they can outwit you and talk their way out of trouble. Others want to explore how much of a case you have against them. Some have committed so many crimes that they're honestly curious about which one you happen to have on them today. A few actually didn't do it and want you to know that. Or they did it and they want you to know why. And maybe part of it is that, at some level, everyone wants to be heard, to be understood, to be valued, to matter. I've interrogated people who seemed to be talking to me chiefly because they were lonely, because I was the first person to take a genuine interest in them who wasn't a thief, junkie, or pimp, because I gave them a strawberry scone. If you're interrogating a kidnapping suspect and the victim is still missing, you don't have to read Miranda at all. You plunge right in with the questions, even if the suspect asserts his right to remain silent. If he asks for an attorney, you ignore him and press on. Courts have validated this approach because a life hangs in the balance. It's called the public safety exception to Miranda. It exists because someone's loved one is hidden away, restrained, possibly injured, with no food or water and maybe a waning air supply. You don't want the cops to shrug and call it a day when the suspect remains close-lipped or demands counsel. The rapport-building part of an investigation is a warm-up for the questions you're going to ask about the crime later on. You want the suspect to see you as a confidant, maybe even a friend, because people tell their deepest secrets to friends. At the very least, you want to be seen as someone who isn't against them, but is acting as a fact-finder, someone who wants to give them a fair shake. These last two things are true, or at least they should be. So you ask questions about the suspect like you're on a first date. Where he lives, where he works, what neighborhood he grew up in, which school he went to, if he has siblings, what his hobbies are. Wife, partner, kids, car, favorite sports teams. You usually don't even touch on the crime at hand until you've gotten him comfortable talking to you. This also helps you set a baseline for how the suspect looks, talks, and gestures when he's speaking about something non-contentious and doesn't need to lie. That way, when you get to the heart of the crime and are asking some tough specifics, you can see how his demeanor changes because he becomes uncomfortable and starts ducking your questions or crafting tall tales. Like a guy who always looks straight at you when asking routine questions, but whose eyes wander when pressed about that gas station robbery. When it comes to getting the nitty-gritty details from the suspect, police styles differ. Some cops begin gruff and get gruffer. Others assume an illusion of intimacy. They straighten the suspect's shirt collar or pick lint off his pant leg. I myself favor the catching more flies with honey philosophy and start out friendly and inviting and get flinty later, if needed. You come at them too hard, they'll shut down because they think you want to put the screws to them. Act too soft, and they'll walk on you. But bottom line is, you want to ask open-ended questions about their whereabouts and actions during the time frame of the crime in question. Let them tell their side, a story that often makes about as much sense as the Greek tax code. One burglar told me he walked into a stranger's house because their door was open and he wanted to warn them of this danger so as to protect them from, burglars. He didn't knock because he didn't want to scare them. And he started rolling the homeowner's $13,000 customized racing bike out the door because it was creating a dangerous obstruction of the entryway. He proclaimed all of this prima facie baloney earnestly with a straight face. And that's okay. The more preposterous their account, the better. You don't call them out on their lies. Not yet. You lock them into a full statement so it gives you more material to play with and shoot holes through when the time comes. After their story is preserved in time, sometimes you'll ask them to go through it all again. The second version often differs from the first in meaningful ways because it's hard for them to remember all the lies they just told, some of which they made up on the spot. It's an improbable yarn giving way to fantastic whoppers blending into epic falsehoods. After the suspect has said his piece, you confront him on any inconsistencies, which often leads to multiple denials. Funny thing about that is, lots of liars preface their denials with what are known in the business as permission phrases like, "Can I just say something?" This is notable because truth-tellers normally don't ask for permission to speak. They just speak. After the suspect has gone on like this for a while, some investigators like to leave the room first and then return after a spell and say something like, "The results of my investigation show me that you're lying," as if they just ran the suspect's statement through some kind of fact-checking supercomputer. Then they demand the suspect tell them the truth. I've been taught to tell a guy something like this. "I've been doing this a long time. I know that you are lying, but I understand why you lied, because it's human nature when someone feels backed in a corner. I'm not mad at you. I get it. Sometimes I lie too when I get accused of something, but I want to wipe the slate clean. I want to start over and have you tell me the way it really happened, because you can defend the truth even if it gets a little ugly sometimes. But you can't keep defending a lie."
And that was part of Chapter 18, Interrogation from Policecraft by Adam Plantinga. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.